So First Peter 3:7 states that men should live with their wives in an understanding way, as with someone weaker,
Yeah.
and because we are both co-heirs of the grace of God, and we don't
Yeah.
want our prayers hindered. My question, madam, to you:
Yeah.
how
Yes.
does a man speak to a woman in a more, or even just live with a woman in a more understanding way?
hmm That's a great question. I would encourage men to be more aware of the way that they speak to a woman.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in that, when the Bible references women being more fragile or more delicate, it's because we are the weaker. And when I mean weaker, I don't mean different value as a person, but that we are physically weaker. We are a
Yeah.
little bit delicate, right?
Yeah.
We may process our emotions, may be more sensitive in terms of how we process our emotions and things like that. And when I was looking at the verse, I thought was really interesting. And like the root word, that weaker also had a reference to someone who was like physically ill.
Mm.
So I thought that was really interesting because when we're caring for someone who's physically ill or who's weak, there's a certain kind of tenderness and care that we provide for that person.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's a great way to kind of think of it is like when you are addressing a woman, whether it's your mom, sister, girlfriend, whatever, I think this applies. There needs to be an awareness of like, she's not a man. So I'm not going to talk to her rough. I'm not going to, be rough with her in terms of the way I speak to her, interact with her, or joke around with her. I might not be as coarse with her as I've seen men talk. And so, and I imagine that the way that men talk to each other wouldn't necessarily be appropriate to the way they might address a lady, right? And based on what you said before, in terms of women kind of keeping themselves in this dignified way, is like men treat them as such, right?
Mm.
Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
there's actually this really cool. It's like a TikTok, and it says like um, boy dad versus girl dad. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it shows this dad how he interacts with his son and his daughter when they're playing
I think
together.
I have seen that.
I love it.
Yeah.
So with the boy, he's super rough. He's like throwing him around, and
He's
he's like
slamming him,
pushing
body
him
slamming
over.
him.
And with his little girl, he's like he like drops her like a delicate flower, and it's like, and you see the difference. And I think that's a beautiful representation of like, yeah, when you're, when guys are with guys, y'all can be rough and tumble, and elbow each other and all this, but when you're around a woman, you need to be mindful of that and like try to be a little bit more caring, a little bit softer with her.
A male receiving that.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like my delivery wasn't harsh, but what I'm saying may have a harsh impact because what I'm saying
Mhm.
may really
Yeah.
hurt, or it may really, like, it may be something you really don't want to hear. So if what I'm saying has a negative impact, has a really strong impact on you, but I deliver it in a kind way,
Yeah.
can that be misconstrued or confused? Like when you think about it later, it's like, oh, he was too harsh on me.
Um, Well, I think it depends on a lot of factors. I think one, it depends on um, what your relationship is to that person, because if they know you well enough and they know your heart and your integrity, they know that whatever you're saying is coming from a good place,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So even if it stings, right? Um, if I know that the person that's talking to me is saying it because that person wants the best for me, even though it may not feel good in the moment, I'll receive it eventually. It may take a time. Exactly.
Eventually.
Yeah, it may take a little time, right? So not just, I think tone is important, like
Mm.
definitely the way that you speak and communicate, but also being mindful of like asking yourself, like, what do I want the outcome of this conversation to be?
Mm.
Do I want her to receive it receive this, or am I kind of going off of my emotion in the moment? I'm frustrated, and that's another thing to keep in mind. Like, where are you emotionally when you're having this conversation?
Mm.
Because if you're feeling impatient, angry, irritated, annoyed, it's going to disrupt that flow, right?
Mm.
So sometimes there's a pending conversation and it might not be the time to talk about it. Like, if your emotions are too hot.
Mm.
So you might need to say, I want to talk to you about this, but I'm going to come back to it. I'll be in touch, you know.
I'll
Um
be in touch.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
if you did everything in your power to speak in a kind way, in a loving way, and deliver that message, and it's still not well received, then you kind of need to wash your hands and like let it sit with that person.
Mm.
Because we can't control how the other person receives the information. Now, if you can be introspective and you say, I was a little rough, I could have done that, but if you have a clean conscience that you did everything you could and it still wasn't well received, then you kind of have to leave that between her and God.
Mm.
And